Hello and welcome. My name is Mark Yuskowitz. I'm editor-at-large for MM&M, and I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar, Practical Applications of AI and Strategic Content, Building Trust in Healthcare Marketing. And we're sponsored by Wolters Kluwer. And before I hand things over to Natalie McGroarty, Vice President of Wolters Kluwer, and Elizabeth Beringer, who's the President and Founder at Spring & Bond, I'll just say a few words to let you know what to expect. ChatGPT, the artificial intelligence tool which uses a large language model to bring conversational AI to the masses, quickly established a name for itself last year in healthcare. It passed the U.S. medical licensing exam and notched authorship credits on multiple scientific papers. Still, researchers and publishers continue to debate the place of ChatGPT, if not give it the cold shoulder altogether. A big reason is that use of AI-based tools for medical content is fraught with legal issues. AI authorship is controversial, to say the least, and would never satisfy the peer review process. But while content may be the biggest bottleneck of an AI-driven future in medical publishing, there are ways pharma brands can safely use the technology. And it holds the promise of revolutionizing the way pharma marketers approach their overall media efforts. And that's where our two speakers come in. Natalie has more than 25 years of strategic marketing expertise across healthcare and other markets, and she and her team work with pharma device agencies and medcoms to develop integrated content marketing programs. And Liz is an ad tech veteran herself with over 15 years of experience on leadership teams across the ad tech ecosystem. Most recently, Elizabeth was Vice President, Head of Platforms for PulsePoint. They're going to cover marketer challenges from AI content to legal compliance and content bias. So I know you'll gain a lot from their presentation. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. This is going to be a 40-minute guided presentation by Natalie, Elizabeth, and myself, and that'll be followed by about 15 minutes for Q&A. So be sure to submit your questions using the Q&A button right on your webcast dashboard. Okay, so without further ado, let's just dive right in. Natalie and Liz, how are you both doing?
Good. Can't complain.
Great to have you both here. Let's just kick off today's discussion with some very broad strokes and hear what you two find most exciting and most terrifying, perhaps, about AI today. Natalie, how about we get started with you? What excites you and scares you about AI and scholarly content publishing?
Well, where to start? I guess I'll start with what scares me the most. As a former publisher, I was a publisher with the company before I was in sales. We talk about content publishing, and it's sort of a slippery slope. We know that there are a lot of folks out there that are experimenting with using AI to generate content. And we've seen and heard stories about authors trying to list ChatGPT as a co-author in an article, and you just can't do that. I mean, instinctively, it seems like a logical matter of transparency to list it, but realistically, AI just can't approve the final manuscript. It can't take responsibility for, the manuscript content when push comes to shove, and that material can't be copyright protected. But as a marketer, I think AI can be very useful for many fronts. In this case, it really can be used as a starter for promotional copy, headlines, summarization. It can efficiently analyze campaign data. It can discover different patterns in engagement trends or content patterns. What is somebody reading about? What's of interest? And in my dream world, one day we'd be able to build out proposals based on data shared by our clients and advertisers, and my AI talks to your AI. But really, the first thing that we think of in medicine is do no harm. So whatever we do, we have to be absolutely certain we don't blindly rely on these technologies that appear to make things easier rather than better. So common sense really has to prevail here. And frankly, it changes by the moment, right? Every time, you hear about something new technologically, you turn around and boom, it's changed again. So it's hard for anybody really to know what's the best thing and what's going on at any given point. So I think it's going to take some time really to form some best practices.
Sure. And at Wolters Kluwer, you're pulling in content from top-notch medical societies and associations. So you know that there's a very high bar to meet, when it comes to what, things can be cited. So those are some really good do's and don'ts of what you foresee the technology being, used for, and what it really shouldn't be used for, probably just as equally as important. Elizabeth, can you share what excites you about AI from a broad perspective?
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing, wearing the media hat, being a media agency, the most exciting thing that AI brings is things that we couldn't see before. And being able to take data and interpret it in more and different ways, and being able to better predict where our patients or even physicians are, and who they are and how we can actually address them from a media perspective. I think it's also, to echo Natalie's point, a little scary because a lot of our media strategy relies on the trust of endemic publishers. And so with AI sort of gaining in prevalence and popularity, just making sure that we maintain that trust with the physicians that we're engaging with, especially in an endemic environment. So I am relieved to hear that Wolters Kluwer is a little worried about AI from a content perspective, because it is so important to what they do and why we work with them.
Surely, and that trust of endemic publishers is hard to regain. It's been built up over 100 years or so, but it can be lost pretty quickly. So, very important to maintain that indeed. Elizabeth, let's just stay with you for a second. Can we talk more specifically about what your clients are doing with AI?
Totally. I'd start by also saying that my favorite thing to do is to reassure people, especially marketers. Everyone always imagines that everyone's using AI and it's everywhere, and I'm the last to the game. The reality is it's still in its nascency, right? It's still highly novel for most of our clients, most of the brands that I've worked with. There are certainly applications that are being used largely at the commercial analytics side. Commercial operations trying to build target lists or patient finding. There's great companies out there doing this at scale, like IPM.ai and Swoop, building, sort of addressable audiences. And that's kind of it. There's largely data. Some are starting to dabble with it from a content creation perspective. But it's not like everybody's out there doing a ton in AI. And so we're all in this learning together. So I just always like to reassure clients, we're all in this together. We're learning together. It's brand new. Let's figure it out.
Sure. So, most of the applications you've seen so far are in the data area rather than in content creation. Elizabeth, Natalie, do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's largely the analytics. We're seeing pockets of it being used, for targeting, segmentation, predictive analytics, chatbots, virtual assistants, maybe tracking of performance, optimizations, lots of other things, I guess, that we don't know about. Our clients are agencies like Elizabeth's and MedComs, and we also work directly with pharma and device. And it's a mixed bag of what I'm hearing, and it's a little bit different for everybody. They're going to be those companies that have the ability to build these big monster machines that sort of crunch the data, and have the ability to do all of that, but not everybody can do it. But we do know that a lot of people are collecting data, and some are using it with AI, some are not doing anything at all with it. And many are still relying on the basics of, clicks and engagement to determine where their best spend is, rather than AI, which is sort of like the hype of what everybody's talking about. When you think about it, intelligence comes at a price. I mean, it's not cheap, and it's not just dollars, it's the resources as well. Who's going to manage the technology? How about the reporting and all those tasks that go along with it? And at some point, you have to ask yourself, is the juice worth the squeeze? For some companies, it will be, but for others, it won't. And technology is probably just going to have to play out before they're able to justify the means.
Meaning they're going to have to kind of figure out this road themselves in terms of digging into the data and seeing how it can inform their plans, especially in an area as regulatory heavy as pharma, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's also the life cycle of any product, right? There's early adopters who do all of the heavy investment. A great example of this would be Teslas, right? Teslas used to be that sexy car driving down the street that only a few people had, and it was way more expensive. And those who adopted it were viewed as the sort of tech forward visionaries of automobiles, right? So the big pharma manufacturers who are building their Teslas from scratch are definitely doing a great service to AI and its implications at a broader scale. But what we need is the Tesla Model Y, right, for it to be widely adopted. Tesla became one of the top auto manufacturers in the last few years because of all of that heavy investment that they did. Those early adopters paved the way for the now early majority and sort of transitioning into that late majority as a product. So I think AI will be the same, the same thing. There will be service providers, there will be technology companies who build the capabilities to make the Tesla of AI achievable for all brands.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. I like that a lot. The big pharma companies are, as you say, building their own Teslas. We've interviewed a couple of them so far in terms of how they're using AI up and down the pharma commercial life cycle, and it's kind of confined to these homegrown applications thus far. Even though ChatGPT, from an overall broad sense, is available to the masses, not so much in this industry yet. So I wanted to.
But those tools can be applied to pharma, right? So that's I think our core sort of. If there's one takeaway from today, it's that there are tools that are emerging, and so exploring those tools and testing them out and trying them is really what's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Flipping it back over to you now, Natalie. What do you think is more important, the message or the data?
Oh, that's a tough one. So for years we heard content is king. Years. And last couple of years we started hearing data is king. Well, I have this conversation with people all the time. I believe they're both king. They're just from separate countries and kingdoms. After all, content is a form of data. In today's world, you can't have one without the other, right? I mean, my team brings content, the trends, the tactics, and the distribution to the table. And I would just love if we could get more info from our clients. For example, if they have data supporting a particular content type or a topic area, we can help. We can make a much better project out of it. We do our own content consumption studies every year, and we can provide insights about some of the preferences. So, for example, we know about 68% of doctors, 70% according to one of the major research firms out there, consider peer-reviewed content the most influential content in shaping treatment options and producing better patient outcomes. So content, and not just any content, but trusted content, is really the right way to go. And, you can build that relationship with the content if doctors are trusting it and nurses are trusting it. And the beauty of it is it allows you to put a brand in a very safe environment. And, you can get the awareness that you need by being associated with it there. So products can stay at the forefront and capture market share. You can also educate with content. I mean, whether you're educating about, product or therapy, you want them to consider the why, why. And finally, you can influence with content. You're not going to influence with simply a banner ad and a click. That's not going to change practice behavior. But if you've got content to support, what your product is, whether it's a study, best practice, guideline, clinical trial, you can provide them with a really good reason to engage and then take an action, and even possibly change prescriber behavior for the better. We learned from our content consumption study that healthcare providers, when they see an industry sponsored message on a scholarly journal or society site, on average, 32% visit the site, the sponsor site, 2% contact the company rep, which I think is good, 4% recommend the product, and 10% file it away for future use. That's almost 50% engagement. because of content and being aligned with that. To me, that's meaningful. And I would hope that, other marketers would see that as well.
Those are great statistics. Yeah. Liz, what's your take in this area?
I think that content and data have to work together. So they are, I think as we were thinking about this question of content versus data, I alluded to there's a kingdom with two kings. So we have data which helps drive really precise targeting, really hyper segmented populations of patients or physicians. And I've seen this happen so many times where all of the work to do that happens. And then again, just wearing my media hat, on the other end of the spectrum, we have one banner to engage all of those people. So I think that they have to really work symbiotically together to really move things forward. For AI to be effective, we have to be able to leverage innovation on both sides of the spectrum, while still caveating that what Natalie says is absolutely true. There are certain types of content that just cannot be replaced. And so those pieces of the puzzle are really important to exist. And data will help us figure out when and where to leverage them. But we still have to have the right content to address the physician or the patient in that moment. And that's where I think AI can really help.
In terms of figuring out how to shape the content in order to
both, yeah.
engage.
So AI can help predict where the patient or physician are in their journey, right? So that you know what to say to them. But AI can also make sure that you have enough content to actually say something specific and personalized to them. Because that's sort of the biggest divide that I currently see is there's a lot of data products being developed. So we can personalize, everybody's saying next best action. That's just like every capabilities presentation that we go to, everyone says next best action. And the reality is the next best action requires content for that action. And that's where I think AI can really help, expedite the production process, expedite the creation process, but it has to be balanced very carefully because we're not replacing medical teams at creative agencies. We're not replacing writers at creative agencies. We're just helping augment the process and innovate how we produce that content. And still heavily human-handed rolling it out.
Yeah, and I bet a lot of the medcom shops around this industry, which is a traditional strength in this industry, are listening very, very closely here if they aren't already integrating AI in terms of how they can do that. And as you say, it's got to be balanced. So how can we get balanced information and provide partners enough insight into developing a proposal or a campaign that is going to spur conversations that would lead to, sort of a more personalized and strategic approach. Natalie, you want to give us your take on that, how to achieve that balance that Liz was just alluding to?
Yeah, so I guess it's sort of the flip side of AI. You need to have some conversations, right? I view anybody that we work with as a partner, and I would like them to be transparent enough that if they've learned some trends or something via AI or any other sort of data analysis, share it with me. I mean, what we see often, unfortunately, though, is that we have a proposal that might come to us and it's just, fill in the blocks. I want this audience. How many can you reach? It doesn't necessarily mention KPIs or goals. So if you've learned something from your research, why wouldn't you want to share that with me? Because I've got a lot of solutions and I publish probably thousands of journals, lots of content to pick from. And, somewhere in there, we're going to find the right content to help with the message you want to get across. So we love if we can get an agency or a client to share their information and their briefs with us beyond just here, fill out the template. Elizabeth mentioned contextually aligned targeted media having the strongest performance. We not only have that, we can add in that brand halo from, a society or an association's trusted content. I mean, that to me is really where the rubber hits the road, right? Having that trusted environment.
Right, and you said that you see 50% engagement there when you have the two juxtaposed.
Yes.
The messaging appearing in a medically relevant scientific environment. Elizabeth, what are you saying? In terms of when the rubber hits the road in terms of media plans, how do you see this all coming together?
I'll preface this by saying I accidentally started a media agency. I didn't really give that background, but I'm an ad tech nerd, and I meant to start a consultancy to help brands bring media in-house, actually. And I think that the thing that I constantly challenge sort of the status quo on, and I think it will absolutely echo what Natalie is saying here, is let's disrupt the RFP process. Rather than issuing an RFP, let's start talking about what the measurement framework is. What are the actual tangible KPIs with very specific sort of tactic or sort of strategy level specifics in the information that we give to our vendor partners, right? I think that it starts with the measurement, and from there we can then start to get in the weeds and come to Natalie and say, hey, it's super critical for us this year to move the needle with this specific subset of doctors, and we think that this is how it's going to happen. But what data do you have that might help us understand this audience a little bit better? And let's have that conversation. Rather than issuing a blanket RFP that says, here's our target list, our strategy this year are these 4 things, because that's never true. And instead try to tackle this on a publisher by publisher basis. And I know that it's really hard to do that because, in an RFP process, you're often RFPing literally dozens of publishers at a time, but choosing a few key strategic partners who are capable of flexing and really going from vendorville to partner city, as I like to say.
Vendorville. Just to add another layer into that, the other thing that I think would be interesting is even taking it a step further. Like, there's this drug and it solves this problem. Like, so what if we took it back even further? I mean, as a publisher, you've got so many KOLs. I mean, literally thousands and thousands of authors and editors that can help contribute to that. What if you pull together a roundtable of doctors and talked about it, and particularly ones that might be working in that area, right? And saying, what are the challenges you finding? And then see how we might be able to craft that solution to engage other doctors and get them interested and excited about it. So, yeah, sorry, had to add that in.
Sure, that's a good idea. Leverage that KOL network and those authors for mining them for insights, as a lot of analysts do. So you talked about what vendors need, in terms of more specifics. Not to belabor the point, but Liz, what can vendors bring to the table to better gauge capabilities?
Data, hands down, data. My favorite vendors, or I'm going to go with partners, are those that bring data to me that I can't get myself, right? There are planning tools out there. There are, tons of industry-wide insights to be gleaned. But what I love more than anything on earth is when a partner brings to us insights about our brand or our product or our target audience that we couldn't get otherwise. And it's not necessarily that data has to be huge and robust. It can be specific to what they offer and their slice of the sort of overall pie. But that is hands down, without a doubt, and any proposal that includes those level of insights show me that this publisher really understands my audience and I can have a deeper and more meaningful conversation with them versus a copy paste proposal. It goes both ways. On the, hey, we need more data, but we also sometimes get sort of proposals that were mailed in.
Sure, more template type of approach, generic approach. Natalie, what's your take on that? What do vendors, what can they bring to the table?
Well, I mean, I think as a vendor, we do have a lot of data that can help inform and guide us. But as a partner, what we want to do is be able to talk to you about it and be a part of that planning process. So, we can look at different content usage across all of our businesses, and see what's being researched, see what's being searched, see what's being read on Ovid, trends that we're seeing, and other, helpful indicators that might inform as you're developing out a program. I think it will also help us in determining the best tactics as well. For instance, we know that healthcare providers, the top 3 ways that they like to stay up to date with information is with education activities, followed by discussions with colleagues or mentors, and then journals online and print. I mean, those are the top 3 ways they're staying up to date. So if your plan doesn't include journal and print, you're missing out a third of how they're doing it. So that's kind of crazy to me, but we see a lot of that now. Everybody's very focused on digital because you can analyze the data, get the data, but I think you can't always get the full picture if you're relying on one single tactic. And we also know we can slice and dice our data a lot of different ways. So, if it's a younger doc just coming in, whether they're in practice 5 or 10 years, all of that, we can take a look at the way that they're consuming content or learning about new information and share that. And as a partner, that's what we really want to do. We want to talk to people about that sort of thing and have those important conversations.
Sure. The next few questions are going to get a little practical here. I'm sure people on the line want to hear about how you're actually using AI. Liz, have you used AI to optimize or personalize campaign content?
Okay, I love this because there's a very big line between machine learning and AI, in my opinion, and AI is an abused word. We do use AI. Predominantly, we use AI partners who provide analytics, whether it's generative analytics from hey, help me build reports in a dashboard just using generative AI. We use, I mentioned already, Swoop. I'm slightly biased just because I love Swoop. But Swoop absolutely uses AI to build audience models and predict patient populations. A lot of our clients also use IPM.ai, which is kind of another product within the Swoop family. On the commercialization side of the business to, again, predict those audience, those patient populations. We work a lot in rare disease. So that kind of thing is critical because you're looking for a needle in a haystack. Largely data, I every day use AI to write emails. So I actually have Google Gemini installed on my personal Gmail instance so that I can save time. And so I'm leaning in personally and professionally into content generation on a day-to-day basis. And as we're building reports for clients or as we're building those types of things, we're starting to get deeper and deeper into leveraging AI to automate a lot of those things that can be automated safely because it's insight versus content that goes out to people. But we're a little lucky because as media only, we're not responsible for the content that goes out there. So it's a little bit easier for us to adopt it.
Sure. Thank you. Natalie, how about you? Are you using it for personalized campaign content or anything like that?
For any of our special projects, we have not used it yet. But I will say that we've used it for a thought starter for some promotional content to drive to some of our, resource centers and things. But it's mostly the thought leaders where we're getting all the content from. I mean, they're writing it, they're going to the meetings, they're specializing in their topics, but we haven't used it to really develop anything out in content. We are exploring a couple of tools that are out there. I think I saw 1 or 2 of them on the list that we had on the handout. But since most of that comes from the agency partners, got to go through MLR and all that, we haven't, no.
Okay, sure. How about, using it for content development? Liz, where do you stand on that? Oh, I know you said you are using it, but can you elaborate?
We don't. Yeah, the
more
good news is we don't have to do it. I wish more of our clients did use it, at least for an ideation, right? At least for ideation, at least to speed the process, because I think that there's certainly a large amount of rigor that has to happen for any material that's released. But I'm so passionate about helping marketers improve their daily lives in every way that I can, and so I'm always, even if it's a marketer working on an internal presentation, you can use generative AI to help you kind of start to formulate the shell of what you might actually want to use. I think for patient or physician or public facing materials, I think it serves a purpose in the ideation phase, but it absolutely still requires a skilled copywriter, a skilled medical team to really own the content and the work product. But we can use sort of the generative aspects of it once something is approved to create iterations of that, so that you can A/B test things like different colors on, I'm just being super tactical, but different colors on banners, use technology to do that instead of manually creating 100 different 300 by 250s. You can use a generative AI tool to proliferate that creative once it has been approved, and just create really fine guardrails around what is going to happen, so that MLR or PRC or however you call it, your review team can get comfortable with the idea of, okay, it's going to, the spirit of this piece is going to remain the same, and some of the visual aspects of it may change over time. Or, if you're doing a conference banner, the name of the conference may change. Those are some of the lowest hanging fruit ideas that I have, but it's not something that's widely being adopted.
Sure. Natalie, your turn on that one.
Yeah. Again, from an ad sales perspective, we're just using it more for content idea starters, much to what Elizabeth said. From overall our Wolters Kluwer Health, we've used AI for, I had mentioned the identifying diversions of medications. We also have something to help nursing students advance with their personalized learning. But I was talking to a colleague of mine, and we were talking about, generative AI. And he said, think about what happened with Google. When Google first came out, librarians said, oh, we'll never, ever use that. Google will never, ever be able to help. Well, where's the number one place people go for a search? Google or Google Scholar. So, it's interesting that the evolution occurred the way it did. And I think we're going to see probably something similar, but it's going to have to be sort of that boxed area, like the content that you've got in there. You're generating using generative AI off of that, and it's learning and learning and learning. So I think that's going to be something that we'll see develop more and more, as time goes on.
Sure. Just wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about, the concerns here. What legal constraints do we all need to be concerned about? Natalie, stick with you on this one.
Oh, yeah. Okay. First of all, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a compliance officer, but certainly anything that you are working on where you're going to be using AI, absolutely get your teams involved, because it's very important that everything is vetted properly, that you're putting out the right information. As I mentioned before, first rule of medicine, do no harm. So in terms of what we do, we would never do anything without having, legal and compliance, certainly vetting through all that, as well as if it were content, peer review would have to be a major part of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Elizabeth? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, if we stick with my Tesla analogy, I'm gonna get a little bit more in the weeds and say I got the first. I was an early majority. I got the first version of the Tesla Model Y, and the door jambs are a little misaligned. You can just kind of tell that the polish isn't really there. And then Tesla, 2 years later, decided to build a single frame, single piece of material to kind of get rid of those little kinks. So I think that when it comes to content generation and AI, I think the same is still true. I think that we are in the early adopter phase, and I think that the tools will get better. And if you think about what AI really is, and you'll see it in the handout, it's deep learning, right? It's a brain capable of learning. And so I believe that it will learn how to operate within any industry enough to do 80 or 90% of the job. I still think that humans obviously have to be involved and will absolutely be involved. And I do not think legal or compliance will ever go away, of course. But I do think that it could help catch things even, right? You could train AI to review documents and speed that part of the process up, and point out things that look questionable, and then have a human legal or medical or regulatory person review what the AI bubbles up. Sure. And they can still do their own review, but there's, I think that the more we refine it, the better that Tesla Model Y gets, the more comfortable we will all get with it. And I think it will become something that really dramatically changes the way that humans work, regardless of industry. When I think about my 2-year-old, I have a 2-year-old son, I don't think he will ever have the same moment that I had in middle school with a, empty processor with the little blinking cursor. I don't think he'll ever have that experience. I think that he will learn how to curate AI generated content, the same way that I learned it when I was in school, how to switch from going to the library to cite resources to switching to digital resources, right? So that transition happened for me. Now kids these days don't even know where the library is. So I think it's the same idea. We're just going to continue to evolve as humans, and I think AI is really going to disrupt the way that we work.
Yeah, and there are still panel gaps on those Model Y Teslas, apparently.
It's true.
Tesla says that they're within spec, so...
They always say that. It's true.
Right. So we may need to, live with some of these, strange inaccuracies or idiosyncrasies or artifacts. Hopefully not the hallucinations, though, and goes back to something Natalie said. Is the content medically sound? That's the bottom line here. So.
Yeah, I don't think peer-reviewed research goes away for that very reason, right? I think that absolutely remains true. I think that the way they do research or the way that they access data will change, but it will still absolutely be the same, no matter what. But we'll see. I hope there's a recording of this in 20 years. We can pull it up and be like, "Ha, Elizabeth, you were so wrong."
Indeed, there will be, but only for a year. So we'll see. Maybe we'll take it out of the.
I'll download a copy.
Okay, fair enough. What about AI and privacy? How do you both see those playing out? Natalie, let's go back to you on that one.
Well, AI applications can involve a lot of data collection, processing, analysis of sensitive patient data, healthcare provider data. So I think it's important that you make sure you're compliant with data privacy and protection laws like the HIPAA, CCPA, CPRA, as well as other privacy laws in place and that are in development in the U.S. and in the European Union. And we see more and more states sort of getting on board with their own sort of privacy laws. And they're changing constantly. I mean, it's amazing. I think it's keeping a lot of people in business, to be honest with you, but that's a good thing. So it needs to be from safe. The content the data has to be safe from unauthorized use and data breaches. I mean, we all read about the data breaches going on. We don't want that to happen with any of that personal information. So I think it's important, really most important, that, marketers, again, are working with data compliance and legal teams when dealing with any personal information. It's gotten very serious. You can't send lists around without any sort of security. So, it's good that we're keeping our eye on the ball there.
Sure. And, one or two more questions for Natalie and Liz before we skip over to the Q&A section. So just want to encourage people if you have questions for them on these very timely topics, please use the Q&A button on your webcast dashboard. We'll see it in the queue, and we'll be able to queue it up for our speakers. Okay, so we talked about challenges with respect to legalities, privacy challenges as well. What are the risks of leaning on data too hard? Obviously, just because data exists doesn't mean that tells the full story. Natalie, what are some of the other caveats there from your perspective?
Well, I guess the first thing that really strikes me about that is, a reliance, the potential for an over-reliance on AI and automation. We go back to who's checking the accuracy, particularly in medical content. They can overlook AI can overlook something. It can create things, the thing that doesn't exist. It's important to understand how the AI arrived at the information that it did. Did it use valid, reliable content? So we need to make sure that the sources that it's pulling from and learning from are correct and they're legitimate. But I still believe that there have to be those human checkpoints. I mean, I can't get away from the thought that, I can't believe we'll ever get to a state where it's completely AI, but to Elizabeth's point earlier, she could be wrong in 20 years, but we'll see. But I think, we've got to think it through, make sure that we're doing everything ethically and by the book, and making sure that what we're producing is not going to harm anyone.
Sure. And, before we get over to the Q&A, as those questions come in, are there specific KPIs that you see that would be good for marketers to use, particularly that are particularly insightful when evaluating the success of AI-driven healthcare marketing campaigns? I'm sorry, Natalie, if you want to address that one.
Okay, sure. I think that there's probably a lot of misleading KPIs, relying on tactics, relying on clicks or impressions, which is your usual KPI. I think we need to look at the overall picture. It may not necessarily accurately reflect the true engagement. I think about myself, if I am, I might see a banner ad or I might read something, but I won't engage with that at that moment because that's not where I am at the moment. But I might go back to something later. And how do you measure something like that? I think in my mind, I think it's more important that you take a look at the lifetime value of your customers. So, how do you do that? How do you get them to trust you so much that they're going to stay with you forever? And I don't know that there are a lot of brands out there that have, that built-in trust the way they had, years and years and years. I can remember, I have to have a Coach bag, have to have a, Ferragamo shoes or whatever. I mean, I don't know that there's that brand loyalty anymore. But I think you have to take a look at the bigger picture, not just one specific KPI, because it can often be misleading.
Sure. So thanks for fielding that, Natalie. Okay, let's go into the Q&A because we've got a few questions here, and I want to make sure we have enough time for Natalie and Liz to field these. Again, please make liberal use of the Q&A button, and we'll queue these questions up. Here's one just to get us started. Considering the resource-intensive nature of AI implementation, what recommendations do you have for smaller organizations looking to harness the benefits of AI in their marketing efforts? Whoever wants to take that.
I can jump in. I think that the really quick answer is partners. Buy versus build is an analysis that every company should always do when approaching anything with a lot of technological backbone, right? And AI is the steepest of technological backbone. So unless you're going to hire a giant data science team with data engineers, data architects, and the uber specialized data scientists who are capable of building AI, find the right partners and test the partnerships that kind of contribute to the business problem that you're trying to solve in that moment. Don't try to boil the ocean of AI. Choose one problem to have AI help with and try to get that done really well. And then you can start to move on. I think that's my biggest advice is don't try to boil the ocean.
Sure. Good advice. Natalie, you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think there are a lot of companies out there that have sort of taken the approach where they've come up with a lot of different projects to work on with AI, but I'm not sure how effective it's going to end up being because really, think about your focus. Unless you've got those deep pockets, it's going to be hard to do. With my own within my own department, we've taken a look. We've spent days strategizing and brainstorming how might we be able to utilize AI. And there's limited amount of circumstances where we might do that. But when we look across like the larger organization, there's a lot of other opportunity. And I think you just need to determine where the biggest bang is going to end up being. Where will you be able to utilize that and, do the most to help people, right?
Sure. Okay. This question comes in from Grace. Can you comment on off-the-shelf versions of AI versus proprietary ones? In pharma, intellectual property obviously is so important, as you both were speaking to that point earlier. So when is a private version needed versus an off-the-shelf one?
I think that's a really great question and an interesting one to answer because of the nature of AI. It depends on the type of product you're leveraging and what it's supposed to be doing. I'll give you a great example. Imagine that you're using an AI product that is designed to help you identify which physicians are the most likely to be prescribers of your product that you haven't launched yet, right? And you want AI to help you learn in the market before you're in the market. There are a ton of off-the-shelf products that help you answer that question. And the answer that you have to find to answer your question, Grace, is do the tools that are out there offer me enough proprietary brain building that I don't need to build the brain myself? And if the answer to that is yes, don't build it. Like use the brain building tool that's available. And it is proprietary enough to just have the right data inputs, the right source data, the right seed information to make a proprietary brain without building the brain. I don't know if that made sense, but I can think of another analogy if it would be helpful.
Whatever you can't get, off the shelf, go proprietary. It's kind of like the point, right?
It's kind of like a painter making their own paints versus being able to take a paint that already exists to build something beautiful. So as long as the paints can actually do what you want them to do and that you can make it proprietary enough to you with the paint provided, right, then you don't have to build your own paint. But if you feel that it's not going to do that, that's when it justifies building something proprietary.
Sure. Grace, I hope that answers your question. Stephen asked a couple of questions here that I think can be combined. One of them was, can you spell out the names of the AI data analysis companies that Liz mentioned? And the second one was, how do we access the latest content consumption habits study from Wolters Kluwer that Natalie referred to? I think those two questions I kind of would rather, Stephen, if they handled offline, and there actually is a tool that you can use. You'll see it on your webcast dashboard called Email the Speaker. And if you wouldn't mind just emailing Natalie and Liz on that, they'd be happy to spell out those names and get you the link to that study. I hope that's okay. I think that's the best way to handle those. This question comes in from Peter. Peter asks, who owns the rights to AI-generated images?
From what I've read, the courts have ruled that there is no copyright because a copyright has to be attributed to a human being. So that's what I was mentioning earlier, the conundrum that you have when somebody says, oh, I used AI to produce this content. Well, they can't. I mean, nobody can own the copyright to that. So, to my knowledge, AI cannot own it, and neither would anyone else. It's got to be produced.
I would imagine that goes for audio content as well, right, Natalie?
I would assume it is anything that's AI produced.
Mm-hmm. And we're seeing some strange. Sorry, go ahead, Liz.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that this is something that will play out across many industries in courtrooms over the next several years. Agreed. Before we have a real answer to that question. And that is, again, one of the reasons why I'm prefacing this with, hey, this is very nascent and we have to be careful about where we choose to participate with AI. And, a star, Jennifer Lawrence, there's an AI version of her and a video is produced. Who owns the rights to that? Can people just make AI Jennifer Lawrence's and have no repercussions? There's so many different ways that this gets very scary and creepy that we could go into, but I think it's going to take several years to really litigate a true answer to that question.
Sure, and we see a lot of deep fakes out there, especially now in an election year. So be careful out there, people. This question comes from James. How might generative AI built into search engines, excuse me, affect the future of paid search? Again, how might generative AI built into search engines affect the future of paid search?
Yeah, I have a strong opinion on this one too. If it's okay, Natalie, I can start and you can sprinkle in. I already see generative AI impacting our clients in search engines specifically. Most patients and physicians turn to search first to get information, to find things. They're not going directly to one specific publisher. They're often using Google or Bing or YouTube even to find information. And the more that Google becomes a publisher and a producer of content, the greater the threat on the entire ecosystem, in my opinion. However, Google's goal is to make people's lives better, right? So as they're able to pull in information and surface things to patients or physicians faster, the question really becomes what helps my economic engine as an individual company versus what helps the greater society. And I think that will also play out in court over time as Google becomes more and more of a publisher themselves and not just a engine or a tool to find information. The flip side of that is I think generative AI for paid search specifically, meaning your ads, could be quite interesting, but not somewhere that pharma will likely play anytime soon. I think it will impact other industries in a very good way because I think that Google is really amazing at building algorithms to predict what people want to see. And so for industries that can, allowing Google and generative AI to write your copy is going to be game changing for sure. So I think pharma will adopt it in about 10 years.
First on through MLR.
Yeah, as soon as we can get it through MLR, right? Yeah. Natalie, do you want to weigh in on that or should we?
No, I think Elizabeth shared pretty much my sentiments about, Google taking over the world and not necessarily a bad thing, but we need to make sure that we're not ruining the rest of the ecosystem, as she said.
Right. Great point. And so we have a few minutes left. So if anybody's sitting on a question and you're a little hesitant, please don't hesitate to send it over the transom, and we'll get it in front of these two terrific speakers. This question comes in from Alexandra. What's an area of media that you think AI could really change how content is brought to HCPs and patients?
Well, I think the smarter AI gets, the more it's going to be able to personalize and customize. But again, I think it goes back to that analogy, when Google first came out, we thought nobody would ever use it. It got better and better and better through the years. I think as we start to see generative AI take over more buckets of data, I think it could be positive. Again, though, I still feel like it's got to have that oversight. It might make a healthcare provider's job a little bit easier in trying to explain something to a patient. It might be easier for a doctor to surface information about, say, some very niche disease state. I think it can all be good, but again, it's got to sort of be that invisible hand guiding to make sure everything is above the board and not going to cause any harm.
Yeah, I think just to add to what Natalie said, the one thing she brought up earlier was the idea or the notion that using media, meaning advertising, as my lens. A lot of brands get hooked on data, right? They say, "Oh, I can measure all of these things, and I know exactly which doctors I exposed with my media, and I know exactly which doctors clicked, and now I know exactly what the impact was." I think that where AI could maybe help sort of paint a bigger picture and create more of an omni-channel future for I'm using the HCP hat again specifically. Is redefining the place for endemic content that can't always be measured, right? It's kind of like a broadcast TV ad. You're approximating through MMMs. You're using some, now you have some individual performance associated with like acrostics or a symphony, but ultimately, I think that being able to transcend the really easy to get addicted to data and instead take a big step back and say holistically, where are prescribers going? Where are they spending their time? And in real time, make better decisions on where to spend from a media perspective. That isn't, as Natalie said before, my AI can talk to her AI and make buying decisions in real time based on where my prescribers are going, as opposed to me making a decision at the beginning of the year saying this is where we should spend because this is my hypothesis. It can instead be real time and driven by AI.
Sure.
The other thing I wonder about here too is, if you think about, we target much smaller than what we used to because we want to get the right ROI on our campaigns and things like that. Like with all this technology, like, are we doing any analysis of where we were and where we've been and where we're going and what it's costing now? I'd love to actually dig into that. Actually, that might be a little side project I do.
Yeah, great. I think that's really good advice for what area of media that we could see AI really start to make a difference. We have time for one last question. I just was trying to pull from the questions that we have what might be the best thought to leave listeners with, and I think this might be a nice one. Is what strategies or best practices have you seen from your work with marketers around AI regarding content creation and campaign measurement that you kind of want to leave people with? We'll kind of use that as the last word for both of you. Natalie, how about we stay with you on this one? You go first.
To be honest, I think it's very young. We're sort of all very new to the game, and I don't know that we've established best practices quite yet. I think people realize they've got to be responsible in terms of what they're doing with it and how they're utilizing it. But I can't honestly say I've seen the best practice across anything yet.
Understood. Liz?
My best practice, I'm going to echo what I said before. Don't boil the ocean of AI. Choose one problem to try to solve. Find a really strong partner to help you do that. Make sure you understand why you're using it, how you're going to use it, and make sure that you have the required data or content to really support its success, and measure it before you try to go deeper into the AI world.
Excellent. Great parting thoughts from you both. Okay, well, that's all the time that we have for today. I want to thank you both, Natalie and Liz, for an excellent presentation on AI and medical content, do's and don'ts, what we know, what we don't know, and all the caveats therein. So it was terrific. This session is being recorded and will be available for streaming on demand in the webcast section of our site for up to 1 year post-event. The jury's out as to whether we might make this a time capsule that we can come back to in 10 years, but we'll see. There is, just to get back to Stephen's question about
Sponsorship opportunity.
Just to get back to Stephen's question about, Wolters Kluwer study, there is a handout in the handout section that you can download that has some information. If not, feel free to email Natalie, and you can also email Liz using that same feature again, or connect with them on LinkedIn. Okay, everybody, I want to thank you again for joining us and for your great questions, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you.